Things with Iran are seriously heating up. And whilst people are wondering to themselves, is it going to be today? Is it going to be tomorrow? Right now, it looks like the negotiations between Iran and America, shock horror, who could have believed, have kind of fallen apart because Iran, i.e. the Islamic Republic of Iran, are interested in not acquiescing to every American request. Surprise, surprise, they don't want to give up their nuclear arms, and they don't want to give up their ballistic missile arms, and they're not interested in actually conceding to the Americans. I mean, who would have thought? But regardless of that, there's the next few days, the tension's extremely, extremely high. But all this has much more significance than people come to believe, because the world is watching, not to see if America and Israel are going to save the Iranian people, which is unfortunate, because that is absolutely a motive that should be enough for people to intervene, but rather to understand something a little bit more complicated and imperative for America's survival, which is, how strong is America? How much do they stand behind the things that they threaten? And if you think that China and Russia aren't watching this unbelievably closely, hoping that America don't intervene so that they can see that, number one, as a power vacuum, they can go in and do their things in the Islamic Republic. But number two, that they can understand that America has really been weakened and Trump is more bark than bite. This is something that people aren't realizing. There are massive implications for America not getting involved now. It's not just a question of if they will. And who breaks this down better than Ben Shapiro? Literally nobody. Let's hear what he has to say. But first, make sure to subscribe, like, comment. Welcome to The Pushback. Thank you for being a part of our mission. There's big stuff coming, so make sure to check back in soon.
Can you imagine what China and Russia will do if they see that the United States, the most powerful military force on planet Earth, makes overt threats to Iran? The United States has mobilized exorbitant resources in the Middle East as Iran continues to stymie and stonewall on its nuclear program, ballistic missile program, and support for terrorism. According to the Wall Street Journal, Iran's leaders want to reach a nuclear deal with the United States, but they are also rushing to prepare for war in case talks between the countries fail. Tehran is deploying its forces, dispersing decision-making authority, fortifying its nuclear sites, and expanding its crackdown on domestic dissent. The moves reflect its leaders' beliefs the survival of the regime itself is at stake. Domestically, the Islamic Republic is more vulnerable than it has been in decades.
This is 100% true. Everybody knows that the vulnerability of the Islamic Republic is at its total high and that the leadership is freaking out. But here's the thing that you have to remember about how Islam works, and specifically about how the Iranian regime works. They won't back down because their whole thing is about their pride and how they're perceived. So for them to say, oh yeah, they beat us, sorry, not going to work, not how they do things. And that's why they'll do things that are actually suicidal. Instead of just saying, yeah, let's sign this agreement, they won't, because their religion demands them pride.
Its leaders are facing widespread popular discontent over worsening economic pictures and the mass killing of protesters last month. Apparently, according to Farzan Sabet, an analyst at the Geneva Graduate Institute in Switzerland, Iran is preparing for strikes by putting its security and political leadership on high alert to prevent decapitation and to protect its nuclear facilities. Iranian officials are still, again, stonewalling on their nuclear program. They're not going to kill their nuclear program. They're not going to kill their ballistic missile program. They're not going to kill their support for terrorism. It is literally the only thing that they can take back to their military infrastructure. Understand that when it comes to repressive authoritarian regimes, the number one thing you have to do is please your military apparatus. If you don't do that, you're out in your ear.
Yep.
And so the Ayatollahs understand that money has to keep pouring into the military apparatus to keep bribing top-level military men to support the regime. And that means supporting terrorism abroad. It means supporting the development of these weapons programs. Iran's leaders are preparing for an attack that could disrupt its chain of command.
I think one of the most important things that people often miss on this whole context is that they think differently to how Western societies think. Often Western societies are trying to think, like, how can we show that we're strong, but also de-escalate in a positive way? That's not what they're interested here. The Islamic Republic is not interested in de-escalation, and their military definitely is not. They're interested in winning. And now they will go till the end instead of admit defeat. Like, that's just part of the mentality.
Naval units of the paramilitary Revolutionary Guard were deployed this week to the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, if the United States decided to sink that fleet, that would take approximately 3 minutes flat. There is strong evidence that Chinese are actually providing some surveillance apparatus to the Iranians. China, of course, is a support system for the Iranians. A Russian warship also arrived at the Strait of Hormuz and docked at the Iranian port town of Bandar Abbas ahead of a military exercise planned for Thursday. And those exercises are supposed to be taking place not far from the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln sailing off the coast of Oman. Iran is also attempting to harden its nuclear sites because they're afraid that the United States will once again bomb those nuclear sites.
I don't know if people understand the Strait of Hormuz thing. This is important. Why is Iran right now trying to do like activity there with Russia? Because they're trying to remind America of their last piece of negotiating, that if the Strait of Hormuz, if they decide to blockade it, explode it, they're going to do a huge amount of issues to the trade. To people who are interested why Iran is such a central topic, it's not just about the Islamic Republic and the terrorist arm. It's about the fact that they're geographically located right in the center of the Middle East, and they directly impact trade from India, from China, etc., across to Europe and Americas. And so therefore, their location is unbelievably strategic, as is Egypt. And you've probably heard of the Suez Canal. You might have heard of the Strait of Hormuz. That's where lots and lots and lots of the world's oil goes through every single day. So that's Iran's main negotiation tactic right now. We'll mess with the Strait of Hormuz. We won't allow for oil to come through, which will disrupt the world economy if you attack us. And that's why they're choosing right now to activate military things happening.
CBS News and Jennifer Jacobs reporting top national security officials have told Trump that the military is ready for potential strikes on Iran as soon as this weekend, but the timeline for any action is likely to extend beyond Saturday or Sunday, according to sources. Trump has not yet made a final decision. Over the next 3 days, the Pentagon is moving some personnel out of the Middle East region ahead of potential action or counterattacks by Iran. That doesn't necessarily mean that action is imminent.
No, it means actually that it might not be, but they're trying to take up the psychological pressure on Iran higher and higher and higher, right? If they're removing personnel, if they're bringing more military aircrafts, if they're doing all of that, whilst Iran is still in the final negotiation timeline, right? There's a few more days. Number one, that indicates to Iran that America is very, very serious. So that pushes them to negotiate, but also protects potentially if an attack does decide to happen.
Apparently, one source says that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is planning to visit Israel and meet with Netanyahu in about 2 weeks for further discussions.
I think that's just
the United States currently.
I think that's the kind of thing that they do to throw out a ploy, like, oh, Marco Rubio's coming, so the war can't really happen. But you never know.
Has the most air power in the Mideast since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. U.S. officials say that the firepower will give the U.S. the option of carrying out a sustained weeks-long air war against Iran instead of a one-and-done midnight hammer type strike. Unclear whether Trump is going to pull the trigger here. It seems to me that just on a geopolitical level, for Trump not to pull any trigger here would be an open sign to America's enemies that it is time to go.
Yep.
This is the box that the president has sort of created for himself geopolitically. The president came out and he said, if you shoot protesters in the streets, there will be serious consequences. Stay in the streets. Help is on the way. If help is not forthcoming, and instead what ends up coming out of this is some sort of weak style Obama deal in which Iran makes a bunch of pledges that are unfulfillable. And that prevents and forestalls Israeli air action against, for example, ballistic missile development. Then not only will that be a historic foreign policy failure by the administration,
correct,
but will also be a green light to China to take Taiwan.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things President Trump frequently said is that the pullout, the disastrous pullout from Afghanistan in the style that Joe Biden did it, led directly to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think that is obviously true. The timeline matches up. It is clear that Vladimir Putin thought Joe Biden was weak, and so he made a move on Ukraine. Can you imagine what China and Russia will do if they see that the United States, the most powerful military force on planet Earth, makes overt threats to Iran, tried to eradicate its nuclear program back in June of last year, and then backs off after this gigantic military buildup, and the Iranians get off the hook here? What will that say to Russia? What will that say to China? Because China, Russia, Iran, they're all in bed with each other. What exactly will that mean for geopolitics in the future? Because let's be clear. While Iran has a ballistic missile arsenal that's capable of hitting U.S. bases in the region, let's be honest, most of us have no idea what phytonutrients actually are.
Here's the thing, guys, and this is exactly what Ben is correct about. This is now much, 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 much bigger than just helping the people of Iran. This is about America proving its power, Israel not backing down, removing this Islamic terrorist threat, and the world order shifting here in the Middle East. Russia and China are watching carefully, as are Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, other countries. Everybody's looking to see what's going to happen here. And should Trump have put himself in this corner? Not clear. Probably not. Should have given himself maybe a little bit more freedom to decide which way. But now that he has, there's really only one way forward, which is to ensure that everybody knows that he is not messing around. And so the question is how and when this is going to happen, not really if. That's my personal take, but only time will tell. And I believe this to be true as well, that if America decides not to intervene, Israel will, because the Islamic Republic is not going to be a threat that they allow to continue for much longer, at least not in its form to Israel and to the Middle East as a whole. Let's see what happens. Thank you for your attention to this matter.